Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another session, part of our program here with Reality House and Facebook Spark AR. For some of you may have joined us earlier today when we spoke to Isabel Udo for her inspiration session. And this evening now we are excited to be talking with 2D creator and now AR creator Doddz. Before we introduce him, I'm going to show you some of his incredible work. Awesome. Well, I think we can all agree some really, really cool effects there, and looking forward to learning a lot more about how Doddz brought those to life. And here he is. Great to see you today, Doddz. How you doing?
Hey man, first of all, thank you for having me on. Of course, I appreciate your time, but yeah, I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, doing really well, thank you, and thanks so much for joining us on this program. To learn a bit about yourself and how you became a Spark AR creator. So, I guess to kick things off, it would be great if you could describe your career journey to date.
Well, I guess how long have you got? I started off originally as an artist, or I guess even before that as a graphic designer. And it was only really during that artist period in my career where I was experimenting with lots of different types of creative outlets. Like I could just reel off a list to you of like starting off as a street artist, then fine art, sculpture, even like poetry at some point. And I'm dyslexic, so that was a very short period. But that's sort of where I first dipped my toe into the sort of AR waters. And then since then, things have sort of taken off, and now get to work on some really cool projects, which you've just seen a few of them. And yeah, really enjoying just exploring this AR space, as it's only just begun, really.
Awesome. And, we really wanted to get you on today because, this program is aimed at creators learning Spark AR for the first time. And specifically, this session is around, any graphic designer out there that's maybe used to 2D work, or even artists. For some, it could be quite daunting jumping into the AR space. And, you yourself were a 2D kind of graphic designer and artist. So what was that kind of initial itch to get into AR? Like, how did you kind of make that first leap?
Yeah, so as you said, all of the work up until a certain date was all 2D. I went to uni and did a graphic design degree. So that's where all of my skills were. And it was just experimenting in lots of different ways. And then I actually saw an Instagram ad for a piece of software which kind of combined art and AR for the first time, but it was using it wasn't using 3D models. It was like you could literally just turn your image into a video, or you could like animate it in some way. So there's skills that I've learned using the creating 2D work that could be applied in a 3D world there. And like that was really just how I started getting into it, because I wasn't having to really learn that much new. It was using all the skills and all the projects I've been working on for the past like 5 years before that, and just trying to get or utilizing those skills in a slightly different way. It wasn't even really that big. You say making it sound as if it was a really huge jump, but it was literally in the same way you would like layer up a Photoshop file or something like that. It was just layering, using a different piece of software, laying it up, and that created an AR effect. So yeah, that was that first project or first few projects.
But that's great to know, because that, a lot of the feedback we get from some creators, they do think it's a big jump to get into. So it's great to hear for yourself, like, people, if you're used to using Photoshop and creating layers in projects like that, you can pretty much apply that same workflow in Spark AR. You started off creating kind of street art, and kind of one of the first things I'd seen of yours was these incredible denim jackets and bringing them to life. Could you describe kind of that creative process and what that kind of project was and still is as you create new ones?
Yeah, just to go back to your earlier point, absolutely. If you're using Photoshop, Premiere Pro, anything really from that sort of Adobe suite, you could really pick up AR today. You know, a couple of YouTube tutorials perhaps, but you could really just kind of begin. I know in some cases it could look daunting because you might be looking at really realistic 3D AR experiences, and that's not necessarily a fair comparison. There's stuff that you can do that is, you know, slightly more straightforward. So definitely recommend for anybody to sort of dip their toe in the waters in that regards. And then the street art and the custom denim jackets, they were the street art was sort of my university just wanted to be creative for the sake of being creative. No real well, there was meaning behind the artwork, but there was no like ideal journey that it was going to go on. I just loved being creative. Whilst I was at uni, nobody knew that it was me that was making this artwork, and it got quite famous in the area that I was living in. So it was just, I just loved having this double life, you know, as you can probably imagine. And then leaving uni, obviously needing to make money, then that's where making custom jackets for celebs, a lot of rappers and grime artists, sort of Drake, The Game, Skepta, Stormzy, a lot of UK artists especially. But the idea for the jackets was to make them really personal, because obviously I have the ability of hand painting them, so I can put, you know, be really detailed in the personalization, which the artists liked, but they kind of still looked like every other custom denim jacket that you would imagine a hand painted one would look like. So that's where, when I saw that ad for the AR app that you could use, this was actually before you could do it on Facebook, that I started combining the jackets with the AR and scanning the back of the jackets and having some sort of animation there, that they just like blew up, because, you know, you don't see that sort of thing. You don't really see it now, but you definitely didn't see it like 3 years ago when I was sort of first started to try that out.
Absolutely, and what a great way to kind of bring like a new interactive layer to, you know, something so traditional like fashion. You know, it's really cool. So just for those, you know, that are used to creating amazing kind of static artwork. So for that example, I mean, that's where you had actually designed the graphic design, and then can you just talk about that kind of that process? You know, are you importing that asset into Spark AR, and how do you bring that to life?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm taking a jacket, for example, obviously when I'm creating it, I'm thinking about the AR first. At the very beginning, I was painting the jacket and then trying to shoehorn an AR experience in, but thinking about what is the best AR experience and then sort of working backwards. So painting, I'm trying to think about the best example that I could do. I created a jacket for Dapper Dan. He's like a very famous fashion designer for Gucci, but the animation that I created was basically a series of JPEGs that could just be turned into an animation of this lion roaring, and then I edited the video in Premiere to make it look as if it was painted, and then painted one of the frames. The first frame was actually what I painted on the back of the jacket. So for the user, they just think, oh, it's a lion on a jacket, but when you scan it, that's the first frame of the video, so it straight away starts off and just looks like the jacket has now come to life. So a lot of that work was done in Premiere Pro, all that beginning work, but then when you bring it into Spark AR, you're just bringing all those JPEGs and combining them together to make a video, or an animation, but that is like 2 clicks. And then that specific type of filter is called a target tracker filter. So when you open up the Instagram camera, it's looking for a certain image. Obviously, I've set that image to be the back of the jacket. So then when the camera sees that, it knows that's where I'm going to anchor this AR animation. And all the animation is really at this point was just a video of the line that I created in Premiere Pro. So a lot of the work was done before bringing it into Spark, you could say.
Amazing. No, that's super interesting, and I think it'll help a lot of people watching this now as to, what could be kind of like a quick win. If you're an amazing and confident creator, producing 2D graphic design assets, that want to participate in this cause, would you say then kind of going in there and importing an asset using the image tracker feature would be something that could be just a great entry way to create your first effect with some existing artwork you may have?
Yeah, 100%. I would highly recommend. If you're somebody watching this who's a 2D designer, maybe working freelance, as a lot of creatives do, that is a very busy industry, and it's very difficult to stand out, unless you've been doing it for sort of 5, 10, maybe even 15 years. If you want to stand out, this is a skill that people want. But some people don't even know that they want it, and it's only when they see it that they're like, I need a filter like this done with my work. If this is something that you can offer, then you've just separated yourself from a lot of the competition. So I think even if you're just on the fence, just learning or even creating one that you could put into a portfolio, if you're a photographer, being able to have some sort of animation within the photographer. I imagine like a wedding photographer, lots of wedding photographers, but if you were the one wedding photographer who also had the AR ability to augmented reality your wedding, you're going to be busy. You're going to be a busy customer. And the same for logo design, branding, any sort of creative out there that's currently working in the 2D space. If you just have that in your arsenal, you only need to make a handful of filters to put it in your portfolio, and I guarantee you'll be making a lot more of them. But in terms of the target tracker, sorry, you've G'd me all up now, and I'm on a bit of a rant. But the target tracker, definitely the best place for you to start, because you can take the 2D work that you're already doing, set that as the target tracker, and then just work towards a 3D version animation of that. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be 3D. It could just be, like I said, a flat 2D animation over the top of it.
Amazing. And kind of what is the learning curve then? So, when you first started kind of playing around with Spark AR, I mean, how long did it take you to kind of get to the point where, you're producing your first effect, or even kind of that learning curve to being confident in producing kind of more and more effects?
Admittedly, when I first started out, it was difficult, because that was like right at the very beginning. I sort of, like I said, found this Instagram filter, sort of fallen into this world right at the beginning. So very fortunate in that regard. But it was a steep learning curve, and it was difficult because there wasn't a lot of sort of online help. But that's not necessarily the case now. There's lots of, I mean, even Spark AR have their own curriculum, which is like really breaks down and simplifies your entry level AR, so you can really get into it. But I would say that it was only through it's not difficult to put like a number on it, but definitely the first 10-20 filters I made weren't necessarily they're not in my portfolio that I'm showing to clients today. But it's just kind of the same with the Creative Cloud sort of apps. You've got to be using them, After Effects, every day to really master it. And it's the same thing with Spark AR. The more you use it, the better you're going to get. But there's so much, there's not a problem that I have in Spark AR now that I can't go to YouTube or go to that curriculum and find the answer to it. So I think it'd be a lot easier to begin today. And then in terms of I think you mentioned about sort of standing out, that this is a industry that is Spark AR is 3 years old. So I'm a good example of having no prior AR experience whatsoever. And then 3 years later, I'm fortunate enough to be in the partner program, which is sort of like their top AR creators. If you, again, to take like photography or graphic design or something like that, that's a 15-20 year career you've got to have before you're at the top of the game. This is, because it's so new, it's a really great space to innovate and sort of put yourself, ahead of the curve, because you just know that 10 years time, every freelancer will also have the ability to create Instagram filters. That's just like a guarantee.
Absolutely. And I think, that's the part of the fun of it as well. Being a creative, you can fail fast, it's a digital tool, so you've got nothing to lose. You can literally bring your imagination to life. Like, you've got dreams, bring it to life in AR. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of that journey, you obviously you learn how to produce effects, and I guess initially you're producing effects for yourself, you're testing out. What's that transition like when you get confident enough to then actually be engaging and producing effects for brands?
You're absolutely right. It is a great space for like a creative person to be in. And even if you're not wanting to go straight away or try and get work, and even if you don't maybe see, if you're in a situation where you don't see any AR work coming at any time soon, just like as a creative, this is a whole new way of creating, whether that be content or just artwork or any sort of creative project that you're working on. This is a whole new angle. So it's just as a creative person, it was just really nice to express in that way. In terms of the professional side of things, it was doing these work for these jackets for celebrities, and they just got more bigger and bigger celebrities and sort of more and more exposure, and then that naturally brings the interest of brands. So been in a really lucky position over the past sort of 2 years when I've been doing it commercially, and then sort of full time now for the past 9 months, where there hasn't been a need for me to go out and knock on the doors of brands. They've very much been interested in like what I'm doing, and I guess there's some social proofing in there with the celebrities, but they're just interested to know how this can work for them. Because from a marketing point of view, I came from a digital marketing company beforehand. That's what I was doing before I went full time. So I understand how brands operate. So if I can tell them that this is a sort of a hack in reaching an audience on social media, instead of doing potentially paid spend, the filters travel far on social media. An example I always give is that if I post my filter to my 500 followers, and those 500 people share it to their 500 followers, then 250,000 people have seen my content for free. And it's not just me shouting at the top of a mountain like my brand is the best, come and buy my product. There's 250,000 people all like socially proofing my brand for them. And you can imagine in meetings that like antennas of these heads of social or whoever it is that I might be speaking to are really picking up, because UGC, which is essentially user generated content, which is what filters is pretty much like the holy grail of content on social media. So it would be useful to have like a good understanding of the social media world, the marketing world, and what brands want to hear for you to tell them. But also, on the other hand, that might be like a slightly more traditional brand who's interested in the figures. Some brands are just so excited by the creative opportunities that they just want to be involved. Like that's some briefs are sort of figures heavy, and then some briefs are just like, what can we do that's creative? Like they just want to make something in this space. So yeah, I guess in terms of the professional side, it's an exciting time. There's a lot of people out there that want AR.
Absolutely, and I think we're starting to see a lot more being used by brands, and as you said, I think only branded effects have been allowed for like the last 18 months. So it's great to see more and more brands taking that on. We hear a lot about kind of face filters and face effects using the front-facing camera, but we're now starting to see a lot more AR experiences using the rear-facing camera. I mean, is that something that you've worked on or experimented with, and is that quite a transition from kind of doing front-facing effects to rear-facing effects?
Yeah, I would say because of that journey that I've been on, which was like, it's always been rear-facing camera for me, because I was doing AR and jackets before you could do them on Facebook. So I never really began using the front-facing camera using selfies. The reason for that is primarily because the tech, you're limited in what you can do in the tech. The selfie, the front-facing selfies, well, I mean, obviously there's a lot that you could do, but that might be a little bit more straightforward. And then when you flip around and you start asking the camera to track the whole environment around you, not just the facial features, which obviously everyone's got the same sort of facial features, that you're asking them to track the complete environment around you, then you're asking the camera to do a lot more. So as the tech gets better, that's maybe why you're seeing sort of the flip of the camera. But for me, that's the most exciting. The way that AR is going, and in sort of the next 5 or 10 years, is that you'll have the tech to a place where it can understand the environment around you. It will not only just be able to understand, say, one jacket, but multiple images. You'll be able to track multiple images within one filter, which I know a lot of brands are, excited for when that day comes. So I definitely see that being the future. For me, that opens up like a whole new world of creative possibilities. Just changing this table in front of me to having like a live football match on it, or maybe it starts growing grass, but having it look realistic. I think that'd be like a really exciting time. And then that's like creatively, but then you're talking about brands having the ability to have virtual shopping and being able to even maybe like try have body tracking and be able to try stuff on. You can't necessarily do that then, but that's the direction in which we're going. And I think from an e-commerce point of view, brands are again excited for when that day comes, because there'll be a lot of people looking to do that when it's possible.
Awesome, some really great insight there. In terms of some recent projects you've worked on, would you be able to describe one or two as an example and kind of tell us about the project?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can tell you about a project I've recently done with Gymshark, a massive global brand. They obviously, during the pandemic, gyms being closed, they wanted to create or do a competition that would allow some lucky winner to have home gym equipment. So the way that the competition ran was a filter, which was a virtual gym, but it was essentially an Easter egg hunt. So you'd move around this virtual gym, which had all these like the sounds of the gym, which people would reminisce about, and all the different machines, and actually people avatars running in there and animation, and it just looked great. But within there was one, all the weights and all the machines were black, because that's their brand, but one was gold. And the user had to go in and sort of like a treasure hunt, go in and find it, and then they'd enter a lucky raffle to win that equipment. So that was like a really exciting one, because again, that was not necessarily about reach, but it was just about like what's the most creative, innovative thing that we could do for this competition. So that was a lot of fun. But there's been a number of projects. It seems to have all sort of ramped up this year, and obviously especially last year with COVID. But some great work with Adidas recently, which was taking that sort of Stan Smith vector that you see of Stan Smith himself as the on the shoe tongue, and having a filter on the Adidas original account, which is, as a creator, like a massive account like that, it's obviously exciting to see your work on. And you could stand yourself and create, the camera would turn you into this vector. And the demo video, because obviously you need to upload a demo video, was actually Stan Smith himself using the filter. So that was just like a really nice project, because you get to work with some really amazing people on that one. But there's been, I could just from creative point of view, I love just talking about the work, because there's just so many different, you may think filter and you might think one thing, but there's like maybe a selfie camera or something like that, but there's just literally so many possibilities, and brands are like really excited about it. So they give you really a lot of free reign, because in that conversation, you're the expert, what's possible, and they're sort of just happy to take over. So there's some really, really exciting projects and global brands, coming out in the near future, which can't talk about right now, but very exciting.
Amazing. Well, we look forward to seeing what they are. And yeah, I think, brands obviously looking at this as super engaging, but also as an artist and a creative, to have your work be shared by thousands, if not millions of people, must be a pretty good feeling, to see all that. In terms of like some tips and tricks for creators, I mean, are there any kind of off the top of your head that you would say to any creator, specifically in the 2D space that's looking at kind of participating in this course for the first time, some just tips and tricks that you would have loved to have known when you started?
I think the main thing, or the lesson you'll learn quite quickly, is going to be the file size for these filters. Obviously, Facebook and Instagram want these filters to work all over the world, and internet speeds, mobile internet speeds aren't necessarily the same all over the world. So you're really limited in your file sizes. So just go in with that knowledge, because you're going to hit that speed bump pretty quickly. And then the other thing is that you need, when you finish your filter, you upload it to Facebook, and then it's sent for review, which can take it can take up to 2 weeks. It doesn't necessarily take that long, but it's always good to tell a client, there's going to be this period here. But what I would, if I was going to give you any advice, it would be to go and I know it sounds really boring, but it would be to go and read the policies of the review process. There's not actually that many, but like, you don't want to have to go back to a client with your tail between your legs and go like, oh, this thing that I promised you, we can't do because Facebook say, we can't do it. And there's been a number of occasions where like an agency sold a filter into a brand, and then they've come back and I've said like, well, you can't promote alcohol, for example, and it was an alcohol brand, and it's like, now you're gonna have to go back and tell them that you can't. So that will save you some potential embarrassment, or just from a creative point of view, when you're coming up with ideas, knowing what's possible and what's not possible is obviously important. I know that sounds super boring, so I'll try not to end it on that one, but that is a really important one. But if we're going target trackers, at the moment, when you open up your camera for the first time for this target tracker, it doesn't show you what it is that you would need to scan. So if we're scanning a jacket again, there's no actual reference to what the user needs to scan. So and again, this is probably like a 2 or 3 click solution, but you could have some sort of visual reference when you first load up that camera. So if we're taking that lion jacket, for example, it was the photo of the back of the jacket of the lion was on the screen, just small in the center. So it's like idiot proofing the filter. So if you see that, oh well, I've got to align the line with the image with the jacket, and that's how you know that that's how you start this AR experience. So I would definitely, in fact, all of the the filters that I do have that additional layer of just idiot proofing your filters.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for those top tips and tricks. And for anyone that hadn't listened to the earlier session, if you are watching this and you're part of the Talent House or the LO or the Reality House creator community, you do have the opportunity to learn Facebook Spark AR and submit that first effect to the Talent House Open Brief. And up to 10 creators will have the chance to be awarded $500. So I think from some of the insight that you shared, Doddz, kind of an advice or kind of directive, if you're a creator that is producing some amazing kind of 2D illustration, graphic designs, there's a really easy opportunity to import that into Spark AR and bring that to life using an image tracker. We're looking for both front-facing and rear-facing effects. So just to close on that, I mean, you'd say that's one of the best options for anyone that's kind of a 2D graphic designer, I guess, is just using the image tracker in Spark AR as the first effect, or is there another thing you'd recommend as well?
I would go for the target tracker. Obviously, I've probably got some bias towards that, as that's what I started out with. But I mean, it's not to say that that's better than any of the others. I would just think that that's, being able to create a filter where you could take your logo and then animate it. That's cool, I think. So I would go for that. But I would definitely just highly recommend, if anybody is, like you said, watching now or watching the repeats later, just to try, like you just don't have anything to lose, and you actually might be leaving money on the table. Like you'd be a fool not to even just spend an hour dipping your toe in the water, and because I just guarantee you put it in your portfolio, it's going to be an absolute gem in there if you're going up against competition. I don't know. I like you 100% should. You just should definitely get involved.
Awesome. Well, we're going to say goodbye to you now, Doddz, and then we're going to show some of your work. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And here's some of Dodd's work. Some absolutely amazing work there from Doddz, and it was so great to have on the session today. If you're the lucky creators that have been able to join both sessions with Isabel, Udo, and Doddz today, we would love to hear from you. And if you do have any questions, you can go to the open brief and add your comments there. So just a reminder, we are partnering up with Facebook Spark AR to help you, the creator, learn to produce your very first AR effect. So whether you're on Talent House or Elo or part of the Reality House community, look at our socials, look at our links, and you can go to the Talent House open brief and submit your first effect with a chance to be awarded $500. And that's not just one creator, but up to 10 creators will have the opportunity to be awarded $500. That open brief closes on Friday, the 28th of May at 6 p.m. BST. So what are you waiting for? Get started and download Spark AR, and we can't wait to see what you create. Thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 7 p.m. BST when we will be speaking to AR creator Christian Venables. Thank you.